from the oppression of what we will explain in a minute, the fallen masculine concepts, the fallen masculine archetypes. Right? But ultimately what we're ending up doing is replacing one disbalance with another. We're going from fallen masculine, these destructive representations of this concept, to all being about the divine feminine, which is really just replacing, like I said, one disbalance for another. So then how do we address this? So we address this by coming into balance, by bringing up the masculine to stand as equals with the feminine. Right? And that's why there's two of us here.
Isn't that cool? I'm just really gonna look pretty and admire James' words and love all of you and just fill up with all the young attention, and as far as I know, that could change because it's all on the feminine role.
Yeah, so the idea here is we're kind of playing characters a little bit, right? Not to say that this concept of this is an expression of what a feminine should be or what a woman should be. But what we're not actually talking about here is male, female, man, woman. We're talking about energetic archetypes, right? We're talking about the yin and the yang, masculine, feminine, the left and the right, right? Where these terms, masculine and feminine, are representative of different poles of reality, different poles of the oneness, right? And so the masculine, which is not associated necessarily to male or female in any way, but to a particular pattern of energy, is strong, stoic, point forward analysis, right? And the feminine,
flowy and changing and light and what do you think? Radiating out, being everywhere all at once instead of being focused.
So this isn't a good or a bad. This isn't comparative values of what is more or less. It's just an expression. The masculine is the feminine is beauty. A man that I find really inspirational to my understanding of this concept is a guy named David Data. And to break it down really to the core concept of what he's talking about is that the masculine and feminine can be defined in an expression of how reality manifests as the masculine is the point of consciousness. And the feminine is all of life that unfolds around it. So you can see how one is not better than the other here. Both are necessary, both complement each other. Both are in this dynamic dance, this play between the poles. So these are characters that we're playing. Characters that we're playing.
Characters that we're playing. Sorry about that.
So what we're going to talk about in our sort of presentation is how to comprehend what it is to be in the divine masculine and divine feminine, right? And again, we're not talking about man and woman. We're not talking about if you're masculine, you're only these things. We both men and women, contain masculine and feminine elements.
Because I couldn't be standing here at all if I didn't have a strong, clear, firmly defined skeleton, right? So, that's one of the physical kind of ways that I embody masculine, even when I'm really going into the feminine. I still stand, I still love me.
And without the confidence, the self-confidence, to stand here and have this conversation, to play this role that's somewhat kind of playfully pigeonholing this concept of feminine. Nicole wouldn't be here, and that's a masculine essence, to be confident and ready to step forward into whatever it is you're choosing. Right?
Especially when I go to speak out things instead of just say the words, because words are logic, mind, and so, you see it?
Now, just for the record, by no means are we expecting everybody to agree with this. We're presenting concepts to debate in your mind, to agree with if you choose, to generate discussion, right? This is not a homogeneous group, it's a harmonious group. So, what I'd like to talk about now, as I enter the writing logistic, let's make a graph, let's analyze the concepts, is how we're going to essentially present what is the divine masculine, right? What is an expression of these things, right? And we're going to do this by drawing a picture. Get it? No. So, on one end, so this is the masculine, right? And on the other end, we've got the feminine. One is not better than the other. One is one side, one is the other side. They're poles. It's actually, the division is really much longer than this, but I'll just have you to be creative and accept that this line is going to represent the entire infinite spectrum.
We can only find so big board.
Yes. Now, the next is this concept I said before of the fallen, right? So we've got the fallen down here and the divine up here. You guys kind of follow me still? Right? So the reason I chose fallen is essentially because, well, divine is quite a religious term. And when we think about divine, we think about high, right? We think about fallen, or we think about the antithesis to divine, we think about down. You know, so what would be a representation of something that's still in a somewhat of a religious symbolism that could represent that? And both Nicole and I agree fallen was a great term.
So that's the term we're just using, right? To represent something, we have a better word, go ahead and use it.
Yeah, we're painting pictures, we're constructing caricatures, you know, take this as a point of reference. Go ahead.
Could you call it rocks would be on the bottom and crystals on the top?
You can totally do that,
Like
sure.
rocks.
For the purpose of this discussion, however, we'll continue to use these terms, but I encourage you to take whatever you need to in order to appropriately identify with this concept and navigate it in your life.
How about frequency and density?
Sure.
Loving, unloving.
What's that?
Loving and unloving.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. So we're already getting to a concept, like getting to an idea of what we're trying to explain here, which is that different characteristics, personality characteristics, rest at different points within this spectrum. Where we'll say this point in the middle is like perfect balance. And the issue that we've had is that we spend a lot of time over here. Our whole society is kind of just constructed over here, right? We'll just call
Over
this,
here.
yeah, we'll call this Western society, right? And the other point of Western
I think
society.
this is Amazon society.
And so in response to that, like this is like, it's really disbalanced. We've attempted to create balance by going up here and really honoring this, and that's amazing, right? But this is only one side of the spectrum. And this is not the whole world. This is like the cutting edge. This is the front lines of the evolution of human beings as sort of creatures, is to get up here, right? So what I think we need, take it or leave it, is this idea to bring up the masculine so that we're all about here on average. Each of us can choose to identify more or less with masculine or feminine. That's a part of how we define who we are. I personally identify more in the masculine than in the feminine. And in that it allows me a better understanding of what characteristics about myself I choose to cultivate. So now we're just going to group discuss this. I'm going to put it out to you guys now to say any characteristic you can think of, but like slow, I can only write so fast, that you can think of. And we'll try to find an appropriate place within the spectrum to put it down.
Violent.
Right?
Violent.
Violent. So where do you feel that would be in the spectrum?
Probably on the left, low.
Do you think that violence is essentially only a masculine thing? I'd say it's more of a balance thing because women can be, the feminine can be equally as violent as the masculine. Pardon my use of the word woman. You know, like, I have a whole lot of social conditioning that's got to my language.
So we'll call this one violent.
Anything else?
Protector.
Protector. Where do you think that would be?
For both.
For both?
Yes.
See, now, I would think, and please, I'm going to take this to the group, that the role or the characteristic of protector is a bit more of a masculine role.
Yes.
Yeah, but when you think about kids and moms, then that's
Actually, the mom protector of the family. You know, if by protector of the family provide food, for example, his role, normal role, the mom is made food, for
But
example, that
is-
is for protection.
Yeah, but is the protector role in a mother the divine masculine coming through a mother, a woman?
Yep. Yeah, I think so.
So then where would you say the characteristic or role or archetype of protector would be sort of like up here, yeah? Because it's not, you know, like selfishness. Protector is something that's really beautiful. Like you're to protect,
I
you're not
have
necessarily
closer to center, James.
You think closer to the center?
Yeah, I have closer to center.
And yet, you can have a violent protector.
Because difference protection.
So let's say protector. Oppressor. How many of us are familiar with this one?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Nurturer.
We'll answer two things at once.
Nurturer.
Nurturer. I personally feel that nurturer is an expression of divine feminine. How do you guys feel?
And then it's sometimes expressed through men when they feed their women like fried meat.
And what was the other word we over here? Hunter. Hunter. So, provider. Where do you guys feel that that was going to expect? Masculine. So we'll say provider over here.
Feminine provide.
I really think that's let's say provider is in here. Closer to this. Let's start thinking about characteristics rather than roles.
Leadership.
Leadership. Where do you guys feel a leadership as a characteristic might fit on the spectrum?
Masculine.
So let's put this one up here, leadership. Because to be a leader is something that's very powerful, it can be really beautiful, very defined, right?
That go on both sides, you know, down below too.
Like a tyrant. Right?
Hail Harbor.
So I'd like to offer one that I personally identify with as being an expression of the divine masculine, which is integrity. Which I feel to be a very divine expression.
I don't understand why that would be divine
Just
masculine though. I think that's way closer to center of both. Divine, it's in the divine realm, but I think, I don't know, because I think it's just as a feminine role as it is.
You guys,
yeah, I'll just counter that with, I think in my understanding of divine feminine is a lot of flux and change in the moment, and therefore, not that its intention is to be out of integrity, but it's very changeable, and so when, say, a decision is made, it can change in the next moment, which could appear as out of integrity. And so that's why within the masculine, it's more, I would put more on the masculine spectrum.
So that you propose a balance on the feminine side to go equally?
maybe flow.
Yeah, flow, being in the flow,
Yeah.
being present in the moment.
And that kind of sense of integrity being more like fixed and the feminine side being more changeable. So integrity less as a value judgment kind of.
I'm not sure about that. For me, integrity is it's more about how I show up or how I am. Like if I'm doing something that's true to me, that's being integrity.
as compared to being women in the feminine, being in the flow is being in integrity. There is no difference. Me standing up for my, for saying, hey, this is what it is me in integrity.
This is true, but so to state confidently like this is what it is a energetically masculine type presentation.
Because of its fixity?
Because it being fixed, like this is decided.
Yes, I'm working, I provide money, I'm working, I make this, and I'm strong.
How about that in the masculine as honor? And so in the masculine, you fix your integrity, and you go back to that point, whereas in the feminine, if there's something that's right, that can kind of be subject to change, depending on circumstances.
Yeah.
Well, that would integrity is defined as doing what you say what you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. Yeah. So I would say the feminine, that could change in the next moment.
So I feel as though this is really big points to contemplate, and in honor, or in respect of other people having their hands up with other points, we're just going to continue to flow onwards. So I'm glad this discussion came up. That's going to hand up for a second. Intuition. Yeah. I feel as though intuitive would be an expression of a divine feminine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not that again, men can't be there, it's just that they are at one time,
Right. And let's remember that masculine doesn't mean man. Masculine is a particular end of a spectrum of energy and how it shows up in our experience. Right?
I would completely propose instinctual for masculine against intuitive for feminine.
Instinctive? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anyone else has more polars after growing, I think that's helpful.
And also, I think instinctive is like really kind of right here, because instinctive can fall on like any side of it. It could be my instinct to like break a person because they stepped in my way, right? It could also be my instinct to step out of that person's way when they got in my way.
Now you're choosing to use your instinct.
I'm going to put instinct here and keep flowing. We're going to take two more. This is a really big topic, but we do have time. We're going to take two more. So I'm going to start because
Mission for masculine.
mission. So how would you describe it as a characteristic?
Drive.
Ambition, goal.
Driven,
Purpose of the mission.
purpose, drive.
Like a goal?
Yeah.
It's like goal-oriented.
Ambition.
Focused.
Focused.
But again, I think that goes definitely very much in the middle or on both sides of up and down line.
For focus.
Yes, because again, it could be it can be divine and it can be very non-divine, having that focus or that drive or that ambition.
So like on a line over here,
Yes.
where the focus can be violent and the focus can be
Yes.
divine.
So we'll just for ease of flow, just put that over there. And the next person to just speak out with something that they have instead of
Intellect versus emotion.
Yes.
great, yeah. And that can even be in the middle here too, right? Like intellect. Because I could be intellectually controlling you to do what I want, right? By manipulating your emotions maybe. Or I could use my intellect to discover a cure for a disease where the cure is being constantly suppressed or something.
So I'm kind of getting something here. It's that some characteristics can slide along this scale depending on how masculine or feminine they are. And then other qualities can kind of slide along this scale depending on how kind of dense or fallen or violent or divine or kind of life-affirming they are.
Totally. You know, so the concept here, first off, like, we just came up with this concept the other day. We've never presented this to a group before. And it's not to have given the answers, but to give a means by which we can interact with this concept, the topic, right? What we're trying to do is like help everybody wrap their minds around how certain characteristics can be masculine and that be a good thing, right? And trying to start to paint a picture of what that kind of looks like. So in my personal experience, what I have started to choose to identify with as an expression of my masculinity, that is also an expression of me leaving the example I was given towards the example I'd like to give, is to move into a space where I find my deep purpose. It drives me towards my goals, and with self-discipline, honor, and integrity, I follow myself towards that goal, while also allowing myself to be open and flow and honor the elements of myself that are always changing. And this, to me, is an expression of being, learning to be an example of the divine masculine.
Something really quick. I'm just kind of thinking about the words that we put up there and what would cause things to slide up or down that scale. And it seems like the upward part of the scale would be selfless, and farther down we become more selfish and ego-driven. So things that are based on like wanting and taking for oneself versus putting other people above. Would be that.
Though sometimes if people are being selfless, it's to their own detriment. So.
Yeah, that's true. And true selfishness is actually for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's the concept of putting yourself first so that you're strong and healthy.
Oneness and separation.
You think about it like contracting versus expansion. Because you contract into the density of yourself, or you expand into the ones that you have.
Yet there's a time to contract and kind of bring back and discern.
I think that there's a balance of the dark and the light masculine.
Yeah.
So being able to discern at that moment which energy am I able to really bring forth. And I think both are so well equipped. It's just being able to use, at that moment, do I need to bring out more of the dark masculine, but not out of the balance so much. Still keeping more in that balance.
I think that's an absolutely amazing point, so thank you for bringing that up. A lot of this regenerative public discourse that Evolver tries to create is essentially so that like all these words are being put out, all these concepts, all these terms, and I'm seeing a lot of people go like, yeah. It's like all of a sudden you've been given a language that you can use to interact with these concepts in a way that enables you to have a better understanding of them. So you're not unconsciously compelled to be one or the other. You have a conscious choice because you're conscious of how to language the options, right? So with our time frame, we're going to move on from this. I'm just going to ask, did you want to talk about your choice in bike?
I chose it.
Okay. All right, so we're going to leave that concept behind. The idea as well, the way that we presented, which was like, we had like a definitive flow. This is the things we're going to talk about, and then also just release it to what comes. So the next thing we're going to do is first, please keep these things in mind when people are talking, because the people that are going to be talking tonight are going to be expressing their personal take on what it means in their lives to be moving as much as possible up into this realm while choosing to identify with masculine characteristics. Right? And in that, I'd like to welcome